everyone, my name is Komal and this is the Criminal Bloom. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all having a good week so far. Today we are diving into a case that is absolutely infuriating, but it's so incredibly important to talk about. It completely blew open the doors in the UK and how the UK handles domestic violence and honor-based abuse. So this is actually a case that legal experts still talk about today, and this is the heartbreaking story of Surjit Kaur. If you are new here, welcome. We talk about heavy cases, but we always focus on the victims and getting their stories right. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. To really understand how tragic this case is, we have to look at who Surjit was. She was born in 1971 and grew up in Britain. Just like so many young women growing up in traditional South Asian communities back in the 70s and 80s, Surjit really didn't get to choose her own path. Instead, while she was still a teenager, her marriage was arranged. I would actually say it was forced, really, and she was married off into the Atwal family to a man named Sukhdev Atwal. Now, from the outside looking in, if you saw Surjit on the street, you would think that she is living a totally normal, incredibly successful British life. She had two beautiful children, a daughter and a son, who she absolutely adored, and she also built an amazing career for herself, working as a customs officer at the Heathrow Airport, which, as you guys know, is one of the busiest, most high-stress airports in the entire world. Her friends described her as fiercely hardworking, she was independent, and she was just entirely devoted to her children. But as you guys know how this goes, what we see on the outside rarely matches what's happening behind closed doors. So inside that household, it was a complete nightmare. By the late 1990s, Surjit had finally reached her breaking point, and she was a grown woman, she was a financial contributor and mother, and she realized that she no longer wanted to remain in an abusive, unhappy marriage. She wanted out, she wanted her independence, and she wanted a divorce. Now, leaving a marriage is hard for absolutely anyone. It's emotionally draining, but I do want to talk about the women living inside families where honor and family reputation are so toxically tied to their character that if they try to leave, it doesn't just cause tension, it becomes incredibly dangerous. According to prosecutors in this case, the moment Surjit voiced that she wanted a divorce, it created a massive conflict within her husband's family, and this is where we have to talk about the absolute fragile egos and the malicious intent of the perpetrators. Her husband, Sukhdev Atwal, and her mother-in-law, Bachchan Atwal, couldn't handle it. Their egos were so small and their minds were so warped that they didn't see a woman that was unhappy and hurting. They just saw a woman that was bringing shame and dishonor to their family name. Because Surjit wore Western clothes, worked outside of the home, and she dared to ask for a divorce, Bachchan and Sukhdev justified in their minds that she had disgraced their family. So in their sick logic, family reputation was worth more than her life. Instead of just being normal, decent human beings and letting her walk away to live her life in peace, they decided at a family meeting that they would simply just get rid of her. And because in their minds, if Surjit didn't want to be under their control, she wasn't allowed to exist at all. And it's just all so deeply sickening. So in December of 1998, these losers put their plan into motion, and the way that they did it is just so deeply evil because it relied entirely on Surjit's trust and her desperate desire to secure a peaceful separation for her children. They had told Surjit that she needed to travel with them to Punjab, India, and that they would attend 2 weddings. So Bachchan told Surjit that if she accompanied her, it would be a final show of family unity and they would officially sign and consent to the divorce when they returned back to Britain. Now, traveling back to Punjab for a massive family celebration is totally common in, I would say, all Sikh families. It was normal, and Surjit trusted the people she was traveling with. For example, me, like, I got married in India, and I had a lot of family members show up with their in-laws. Like, it's just something that us Sikh families do. We go into these weddings, like, we're just really big, like, it's just completely normal in our culture. Surjit trusted the people that she was traveling with, and why wouldn't she? That was ultimately her family, and she packed her bags believing that after this compromise, she would get to start fresh and have freedom. She left her 2 children behind in the UK, thinking that she would be back in just a couple of weeks. Her baby son was just 9 months old, and her daughter was only 7 years old. Unfortunately, this trip was a complete and sick lie. There was never going to be a divorce agreement. Before they even boarded the plane, Bachchan and Sukhdev had already held one of their secret family meetings in London to plot Surjit's murder. Now, here is something truly heartbreaking that makes this whole case even more tragic. Surjit's sister-in-law, Sarbjeet, actually knew about this meeting, but in the days leading up to the flight, Bachchan completely isolated Surjit, and Sarbjeet, that's the sister-in-law. I know their names are very similar, so I'm gonna try my best to pronounce them as they are. Surjit is our victim, while Sarbjeet is also a victim, but she is the sister-in-law of Sarbjeet. So I know I'm going to try my very best to say their names fully. So Sarbjeet was strictly forbidden from speaking to or being alone with Surjit, and Bachchan threatened her with severe consequences if she even uttered a word to Surjit. Ultimately, Sarbjeet was also terrified for her own life, and Sarbjeet took what she thought was the safest route to save her sister-in-law. And the exact moment that Surjit and Bachchan flew out to India, Sarbjeet secretly called Crime Stoppers and sent an anonymous detailed warning letter directly to the local UK police station. She told them about this murder plot, named all the family members, and gave the exact location in India where Surjit would be. She prayed that the police would read it, intervene, and bring Surjit home safely. Tragically, that help never came. The second Surjit arrived in India and those 2 weddings concluded. The 2 weddings were on December 5th and 6th. She completely vanished. She never made it back to Britain. She never got back on a plane, and her poor children would never see their mother again. She was just gone, and to take a mom away from a 9-month-old baby and a 7-year-old child is absolutely infuriating. Like, what kind of monster does that? For years, it looked like these monsters might actually get away with it because to this day, Surjit's body has actually never been recovered. Think about how difficult that makes an investigation. Normally, true crime investigations live and die by the physical forensic evidence because the body tells a story. It tells the medical examiner the cause of death, it gives the police a timeline, and it leaves behind DNA and physical clues linking a suspect directly to the crime. In Surjit's case, investigators had absolutely nothing to work with. They had no body, no crime scene in Britain, and no forensics. And do you guys remember that anonymous warning letter Surjit sent the police before the murder even happened? The police they lost that letter. When Surjit later brought it up, they claimed that there was no record of any letter or call. Instead, Bachchan and Sukhdev, they started these sick web of lies to cover up what they had done. So they told the police and community members that Surjit had simply run off with another man in India, and Sukhdev even lied and said that he spoke to her over the phone and she confirmed that she wasn't coming back. He went so far as to forge her signatures on property papers so he could steal her share of the house. And he also forged fake letters to Indian police to cover his tracks as well. For 9 long years, her children were forced to grow up in these like crazy web of lies, and they were kept in the dark about what really happened to their mother, while the family pretended she had simply abandoned them. Sukhdev and Bachchan, they probably thought that they had committed the perfect crime because they went back to their lives in Britain and thinking that because they didn't have a body, the British authorities could not touch them. And police had their hands tied because there was no body and there was all of these documents that were forged, and it honestly looked like Surjit had run away with a guy. Like the way that nobody came forward, nobody said anything. This just really highlighted a systemic failure in how honor-based violence was treated in the UK. I just want to pause here because it is so important to understand what this actually means. Honor-based abuse happens when a family or community decide that someone's personal choices have brought shame upon them, and the victims are almost always women and girls. It can be triggered by anything, so it could be you choosing your own partner, refusing an arranged marriage, wearing certain clothes, asking for a divorce, or literally just wanting an independent career. I also want to be entirely clear, these crimes are not rooted in religion. There is no religion that justifies this. This is driven entirely by toxic family dynamics and a desperate, pathetic desire to preserve reputation over human life. As the years dragged on, the police were doing very little, and they were treating it as a overseas missing persons case. In closed families and really tight-knit communities, getting people to talk is incredibly hard. The witnesses are terrified and families stay silent out of this twisted sense of loyalty, even though they know something horrific has been done and committed. For years, Surjit lived in the exact same house as these murderers, and she was terrified for her life. She witnessed the toxic family dynamics firsthand, and after Surjit vanished, Bachchan proudly would tell the family that she had arranged her own brother to drug, strangle, and throw Surjit into the Ravi River in India. Bachchan then warned Sarabjit that if she ever stepped out of line and spoke to the police, the exact same thing would happen to her. Like, the audacity of this loser, controlling lady. Like, what is wrong with her? You know what's crazy to me is that when I it takes me months and months to research a case, but when I do research a case and a mother-in-law is a perpetrator, because it's like, you were once a daughter-in-law. Like, where did this come from? Like, it happens so often, and hopefully one day I can do an entire segment on that in itself. But like, the fact that Bachchan was a perpetrator to women, and she also is a woman, like, that shocks me. Like, I could never imagine doing that to another woman, like, let alone anybody. But to a woman, like, what? Living under all of this trauma, Sarabjit actually got a life-threatening ulcer that was caused by severe stress. And while she was recovering, she decided that enough was enough. And she told her father, who actually encouraged her to fight for justice. Go dad, honestly. Girl dad for the win. When the case was finally handed to a officer named Clive Driscoll in 2005, everything had changed. Clive actually went back into old police archives and finally located that missing letter. He found the original unsigned warning letter, and it was buried so deep in old files, and it completely validated Sarabjit's story. To stand up and testify against your own family is a nightmare scenario for anyone. Like, I could not imagine doing that. Like, I can't even think about the strength that it took Sarabjit to do this. And also, it's an honor killing case. Like, that amplifies everything. Like, she carried this astronomical risk of something happening to her as well. She wasn't just risking a family argument, she was risking her entire life. Sarabjit looked at what had been done to Surjit, and she chose justice over this toxic loyalty, and her testimony became the absolute backbone of the prosecutor's case. 9 long years after Surjit was lured to India, the case finally made it to Britain's Central Criminal Court, and it was a 13-week trial in the spring of 2007. The prosecutors stood up and laid it all out. They argued that Sukhdev and his mother Bachchan had meticulously planned and orchestrated Surjit's murder in India simply because they decided she dishonored them by wanting a divorce. And the defense did exactly what you would expect. They tried to play the no body, no crime card, and they told the jury that there was no physical evidence, there was no body, and therefore there was not enough proof to convict. But the jury looked at travel records. They saw the warning letter Sarabjit has sent, and most importantly, they listened to Sarabjit. It was 3.5 days of emotional testimony from Sarabjit, and they saw right through the defense's garbage. In July of 2007, both Sukhdev and Bachchan were found guilty of murder. And in September of that year, the judge handed them both life sentences. Bachchan was 70 at the time, and she was the oldest woman in British history to get life. And she was ordered to serve a minimum of 20 years, but it was later reduced to 15 after her appeal. And her son Sukhdev was ordered to serve at least 27 years behind bars. Okay, now I want you guys to think about what this moment meant for Surjit's children. So they were 9 and 16 by the time the verdict came down. For nearly a decade, their mother was just missing, and suddenly the devastating truth was out. Their father and grandmother were convicted murderers who orchestrated their mother's death. So following the trial, the kids were taken into care, and it triggered a very bitter custody and legal fight between Surjit's birth family and the Atwals. Imagine this overwhelming trauma these kids had to process. So they lost their mother at such a young age, and then now they have to grapple with the shocking betrayal committed by their father and grandmother who raised them. Oh my gosh, at such a young age? This verdict didn't just provide justice, it made legal history. This was a landmark conviction because it proved that a murder prosecution could succeed in the UK even if the victim's body was never found overseas. It sent a massive booming message to the cowards everywhere. You cannot just export your violence to another country, hide the evidence, and think that you are safe from the law. Justice will still find you even years later, even without a body. Now, you would think after putting her own life on the line and undergoing years of threats, Surjit might want to step out of the public eye and live quietly. But Surjit refused to stop fighting, and she knew exactly how many women were currently in the same situations and living in the same silence. So in 2015, Surjit teamed up with Clive, and he is the very officer who believed her from the start and helped build the case against Surjit's killers, and together they co-founded the charity True Honor. True Honor was created with two very simple goals, and it was to stop honor-based abuse and to save lives. Because Surjit is fluent in Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi, she is able to communicate directly with victims from South Asian communities who are isolated by language barriers and even cultural control as well. The charity provides confidential one-to-one support for victims of domestic abuse, forced marriage, and honor-based violence. But Surjit didn't stop at direct victim support. She also took her lived experience directly to the authorities, and today through True Honor, she actively trains police departments, healthcare workers, social services, and legal teams across the UK, and she teaches them how to spot subtle, dangerous red flags of honor-based control. And then this is something that standard domestic violence training often misses. So she went and did that. And she even went and joined the police force herself as a police community support officer to directly serve her community. She also wrote the best-selling memoir, The Honor Killing That Shocked Britain, by the sister who fought for justice. Surjit turned her unimaginable pain and fear into a lifeline for thousands of women who felt like they had no voice. So to end this video, I just want to say abuse is abuse. There is no tradition, no culture, and no warped concept of honor that gives anybody the right to control, abuse, or kill another human being. And what makes this story a little bit even more touching is that Surjit, despite all of the danger and family fallout, she went on to form a deeply loving and close bond with Surjit's children as they grew up. She helped keep Surjit's memory alive for them and ensured that they would grow up knowing how much their mother truly loved them. At the end of the day, as we wrap up this case, we have to look past the legal milestones and the historical verdicts and remember human cost. Surjit Kaur was a real person. She was a daughter, she was a sister, and she was an incredibly dedicated mother whose children had to grow up without her warmth, her guidance, and her love. She was a hardworking colleague at the Heathrow Airport, and she was a woman who did absolutely nothing wrong except for wanting the basic, fundamental human right to choose her own destiny. Her life was stolen from her by two deeply selfish, controlling people who cared more about what the neighbors thought than the life of their own family member. But because of the strength of the people that refused to remain silent, Sukhdev and Bachchan Atwal are defined by what they are, convicted murderers, and Surjit's name will never be forgotten. Her story changed the world, and it continues to protect women who are still at risk today. I want to know your thoughts on this one down below. The sheer bravery it took for Surjit to speak up is just unreal. I want to thank you guys so much for listening and hanging out with me today. I love you guys. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. But because of this